My name is Irene David-Arinze, reporting live for YOUNGO TV. And here with us today, we have a very important guest, particularly in the area of climate financing. David Carlin, who leads the UNEP FI, which is the United Nations Environmental Programme Finance Initiative. David Carlin is a climate finance expert, and we're really excited to have you on, our program this morning. Thank you so much. So first things first, you've been here since the 4th of December, and you've been following, I reckon, all of the conversations regarding climate financing. We also saw a couple more pledges being put into certain pockets. We saw that for loss and damage. But in general, what would you say that your response would be? Are these the things you expected while you were coming for COP? Have they met your expectations, or you're still expecting some more, at least before the end of COP?
Yeah, so there's great energy here, and it's really exciting to see how the financial community has gotten behind the topics of not just mitigation finance, but also adaptation. I was just walking over here and saw a rally for adaptation finance, which is the first time I've seen that, but realizing that these things are so important. There's a saying at COP that nothing is final until everything's final, and so where we're at right now from the negotiating process is that there's still a lot of uncertainty and incompletion. And so there's been great energy here. It's been incredibly exciting. And outside the walls of the negotiations, I think there's been a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and a tremendous amount of willingness to confront these topics, especially on the adaptation side. I still think we're at the early stages in the international processes of rewiring our financial system to work for the global south, to work for the needs of a sustainable future. And I do think in the text itself, we have a long way to go between now and the end of the conference in order to make those things, such as a doubling of adaptation finance, a greater commitment on the part of the developed world. We really are still waiting for those things to reach the final text and become final.
Okay, so hopefully we see them. Now, emerging markets, particularly those within the global south and developing economies, they often lack a domestic supply of sustainable finance resources. We still see that huge gap, talking about Africa, for example, in terms of what we currently have available in our pocket and what we need both for mitigation and adaptation, for loss and damage and the likes of them. We're yet to develop, and some of the challenges we still, have are things like the development of our green taxonomies. We're yet to solidify that ground, sustainability, disclosure requirements, and the rest. But how can we start to bridge these gaps, particularly the fact that we also lack that technical expertise?
So I think in some ways the technical expertise is one of the areas that can be addressed first because of the ability of the international community, but also the power of modern technology to help educate and inform. And of course, in the Paris Agreement, that technical assistance is one of the key articles and one of the expectations that countries will be provided that. And part of that means helping to mature financial markets and systems. Part of it, though, is really skill building for young people, for professionals, to help bring these concepts in, and to recognize that many of these individuals are experts in their local context. So the goal isn't simply exporting a model or even finance, it's really helping to bring these international structures in, but into the hands of people who have the local knowledge to put them to use. On the financing question you asked, I think that one of the keys is thinking about how we unlock the value within all of these countries of the resources, of the human potential, and of course natural resources, and beginning to think of how those things provide value, bring money into the country, not just as foundation funds, not just as charity, but really as growing economic activity to build that capital stock, and to couple that with the technical assistance allows for the products and the complexity necessary to help tackle some of these things domestically as well.
So when you talk about, the complexities and the likes, for example, one thing that I have found, and the WTO Director General also mentioned, are we're currently not speaking in the same language when it comes to standards for which, say, corporations, organizations need to report by, right? And I know that I know that in UNEP FI they do a couple of things to sort of ensure that standardization. Currently we have about 73 different standards globally, and I know that this would keep increasing if we do not come to a point of harmonization of the standards. So what can we start to do to ensure that there is harmony in that space?
Yeah, if you think of different standards a little bit, like different size pipes that you're trying to fit together. If we're trying to get finance to flow, and I think that's a good analogy, thinking of it like water, it is the key source that needs to drive the climate action, both on mitigation and adaptation. The way to get that to happen, though, is to think about where standards help put those pieces of pipe together, and that's some of the work that we've been doing both with the private sector but also with supervisors to help accelerate the development of standards, help accelerate the knowledge, and also increasingly now working as a knowledge partner with the International Sustainability Standards Board, which is an initiative of the IFRS Foundation, and they are focused on doing for sustainability reporting what financial reporting looks like today, which is whether you're operating as a company in China, in the US, in Africa, in South America, across the world, there is a common expectation that your investors will have about some sets of information. Will there be differences? Of course, but part of this is making sure not just that we're speaking a similar language, but that there's interoperability, as we say, and interpretability between these different areas.
So for financial institutions particularly, what kind of, I mean, we see that in Africa, we have the likes of Access Bank that, you know, for those people, they always like to ensure that their sustainability report is out there. What are those specific things that one needs to start to pay attention to if perhaps we've not had them in our reports prior to now, but you believe that it's important? What are those things that are missing that needs to start coming into our financial reporting standards?
So I think if I had to name two big things, I would say a strategic and governance vision. So at the top of the house, how is this organization really thinking about sustainability? How do we know that these processes, practices, and areas of discussion in this report really integrate into what this business does? And how are there areas of compatibility with the current operating model and incompatibility that will need to be changed over time? Unless we really know how those pieces fit together, the report sort of sits as a separate piece of paper. So I think part one is that big vision, but part two is giving us some of the numbers, the metrics that are transparently calculated and clearly reported that give a sense of what goals do you have, but also what progress you're having. I want to know about how much in renewable energy you've purchased. I want to understand your emissions if you're a financial firm or if you're a company in a high emitting industry. I want to understand other relevant, both biological as well as climatological factors that may be of relevance to you. And so once we have those numbers, then we can put them into that universe of comparison, you versus a peer company. And I think that's really how we get this information in reports to become valuable and usable, rather than just something that's expected by regulators.
All right, and finally, for young people, because we still have that skill gap, right? And if we say that we have this level of skill gap in terms of climate financing reporting, climate financing initiatives, you know, and all of that across board, how can young people start to hone their skills in this particular field, which you've been able to navigate so seamlessly, in my opinion, right?
That's very kind of you to say, and I do think as a pitch here for young people to really think about climate finance and think about the financial sector as an important role for mobilizing the change that we need. Because we need people with your passion, with your vision. You really can make a difference. Finance, as I was saying before, using that analogy like water, it is the flows that need to come to nourish all of the parts of a sustainable future. And so while we tend to think of finance as being numbers and being kind of this stodgy and maybe more kind of capitalist focused idea, I really think that understanding and re-architecting finance is not just the responsibility of international diplomats, it's not just the responsibility of multilateral development banks and CEOs of corporations, but also of young people within these organizations to step up and say, we want a voice and we want to be part of an organization that is driving positive change. So I do think it's an impactful place to be, and I do think it's a place where a lot of those skills can be learned and developed and then put to use.
Thank you so much, David. It was so good having you on YOUNGO TV. Thank you.